Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Boots to Boardroom podcast hosted by the Catalyst program. My name is Staci Swindler. I'll be the host today, and we are interviewing the typical host, Blake Miles. Blake Miles, would you like to say hello?
Hello.
And would you like to give a quick intro from what you've been doing on the podcast so far? We're
Yeah,
on
sure.
episode 3.
Yeah. So the past few episodes, first show was just an introduction to the show, and me and you and Jacob, and talking about what the Catalyst program is and what we're doing and what we're planning on doing and what's coming up in the future. And we just finished a recording yesterday with one of our previous cohort graduates, and there'll be more of that coming in the future. So cohort graduates and veterans that have been successful in the past, and civilians that have an interesting story about interacting with veterans that have been through transition in their sphere of influence, I guess you could say.
All right. So I was going to save this towards the middle of the podcast, but I think I'm just going to jump right into it and ask you, obviously stuff we haven't really mentioned already about how you got connected to the Catalyst program. Maybe you could speak about, just jump right into what was going on. You were transitioning out of the military. You were sitting in a college admissions office, and some interesting things happened that kind of sparked some moves in your life.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So it was back in probably 2012, 2013 time frame. I was attending school at Indiana Purdue in Fort Wayne. It's a joint Indiana University and Purdue University. I think it's only Purdue University now, but so I was going there. I was working on, I think, accounting and marketing at the time, which is kind of a weird mix, but I ended up switching, but another story. So I was going there, and I was sitting in the guidance counselor's office, going through my list of classes that I still need to take and trying to get an understanding of what all needs to be done still and what the timeline was going to look like. And,
So what were you
yeah.
going for, a bachelor in accounting and marketing? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I started off, and I can't even remember what exactly I started off, but I took an accounting class, and I really enjoyed the numbers. I enjoyed being able to look at a company's numbers and figure out like what was going on in their business and identifying anomalies. I guess that's probably the easiest way to put it. I like finding anomalies and patterns, and
Nice.
so I got into accounting, and I decided that was the path that I wanted to take, and and I made it to accounting too, and realized that I'm not good at memorizing the formulas and
The law?
it was for memorizing the formulas and taking the time to. I wasn't diligent in learning the formulas basically, so I bounced out of
Right.
accounting and just ended up going for a general studies degree. And the reason for that was I had a job lined up, or what I thought was going to be a career lined up, and so I was like, I can get done in 2-3 less semesters going the general studies route, so I just opted for that. But
And what was that career that you
so
had
that
lined up?
was I was working with I volunteered for the Green Beret Foundation back in right after I got out of full time back in 2011. A buddy that I went through basic training and the Q course, the Special Forces Qualification course with, was the founder of the Green Beret Foundation, Aaron Anderson. And I reached out to him
Nice.
one time. I noticed that their social media at the time wasn't doing much, and I had some experience with that as a recruiter, and I offered to volunteer, and he brought me on just as a part-time volunteer. But then it ended up I got offered a role as a program manager for a new program that they were starting called Next Ridgeline, with the purpose being to help former Green Berets transition out of the military into civilian life. And
Nice.
so they're like, hey, this is a salary job. If you want it, you can have it. I was like, that sounds perfect. So I opted to do that. But so I decided, like, I have this lined up. I don't really need a degree for it or anything else, and I've already burnt through all my GI Bill money at this point. So yeah, I'll do that. And but anyway,
Yep.
so I'll tell more about that later. But yeah, it's the general studies is just get out, check the block, get
Yep.
out.
Get in, get out. Cool. And then, so was it when you were switching to general studies that you were in the admissions office trying to figure out what courses
Uh,
you had to do still to get
I
that
don't
degree? Or
I,
was
I
that
don't
later?
even really remember precisely when that happened, but so yeah, I was in. I think it was probably one of my earlier meetings with the counselor's office and figuring out what I needed to do. But so I'm sitting in there, and they start going through the list of all these classes that I still have to take, and the one that stood out the most to me, that I was already kind of frustrated because it felt like it just never ended. Like it kept going on, and I get one semester done, and it was like, oh, there's these classes. Maybe I just wasn't paying close enough attention, which is probably the case given my normal behavior. But
It's hard though.
it
The
was
college process is hard. I mean, even for me, I joined right out of high school, went to university, but I was 4 years in, about to graduate, and they're like, by the way, you need to take an advanced statistics class. And if you want to graduate on time, you have to take it in the summer for the entire summer. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. So I was enrolled like 2 weeks
yeah.
later doing a full summer course. So I think it wasn't you, it's just college can be like that. But what probably made it even more difficult, and I don't know if we've talked about it yet, enough is that you would have had experience in the military. How long were you in the special forces?
So I was two.
Or should I say
Well,
military, actually?
it
Maybe
was two
clarify.
two years training, and then I spent about 5 years on teams, and then 2 years, 5 years plus 1.5 in the National Guard, and then I spent about 2 years as a recruiter in the National Guard. So total, it was
Right. So coming
about
in,
9.5 years total in the military.
right. So like going into college, it's not like you were some brainless, experienceless high school grad like I was. You had some experience under your belt,
I or
some
so I
world
thought. Yeah,
traveling
yeah. That
experience.
was my assumption
Yeah.
going into it.
And you would have been given at least a handful of credits.
Yeah,
Correct me
I
if I'm
think
wrong.
I ended up with it was something like 30 credits maybe. I can't remember the exact number. It didn't feel like it didn't feel like
Enough.
enough. Like one thing was like a foreign language class was one of the options that I could take to satisfy our requirements, but I part of Special Forces qualification course is you got to learn a language, and I learned Tagalog, the Filipino language, and it was
Wow.
6 months, Monday through Friday, from 9 in the morning till like 4 o'clock at night. With a few breaks scattered throughout and lunch. So I did the math, and
Full time.
there was a lot of credit hours that could have been awarded from that, but it yeah, and
But they
that's
wouldn't.
at the time. This was before the joint service transcripts, which kind of changed a lot of the dynamics and how the college look at military training. But at the time it was it was just like whatever comes out of your army transcripts. That's you just got to deal with it.
Right. And then I know I keep saying it, I keep going back because I just want to hear your interaction um, in that admissions office. And they're like, yes, you need to fulfill this requirement of this, was it communication?
Yeah, it was the one that really floored me, that set me on a tailspin, was international communications. And I read the description, and it's basically saying it's important for business and a bunch of things to understand that different cultures have different styles of communication, and they communicate in different ways, and there's all sorts of nuances that you need to be aware of. I don't know what the description was, but something like that. And I'm thinking to myself, like, the last thing I was doing in Iraq was leading Iraqi army troops or Iraqi scouts, and at this point I had learned enough Arabic to where I could communicate with their team leader, my counterpart, and his team, without an interpreter because I
Right.
want
That's really impressive too.
well, and it was just because like you spend enough time with them. I mean, we'd go and hang out with them, and we'd eat with them, and we'd train them in different things, and this is with an interpreter, so I start to learn the nuances of their language, and going through 6 months of Tagalog training, and you learn how to listen to different languages, and that's a skill I never realized was a thing until I started doing it. But it just
Sure.
it was my thinking was like I've checked the block on this, but there's no way that I can communicate that without sounding belligerent or crazy or whatever they're gonna see. So
So wait, hold
yeah,
on. Let me pause you before you keep going.
yeah,
We'll paint a picture. You're sitting in the admissions office, and they're like, "Yep, this is the course. It's about communications and understanding the different nuances of different cultures." And what you probably wanted to say was, "Listen, I not only did this, but I did it on like a life and death scenario where if I didn't get the communication right, it could have been big things, in people's lives. If is that correct?"
yeah. That sums it up pretty well. I mean, it's as high stakes of a scenario as you can get, but it doesn't tie to anything in the real world. So who
Right.
what
Civilian
yeah
life.
what difference does it make to them? And I I wasn't mad at the counselor or anything. It was just I understood the bureaucracy. I understood what the red tape was. I just despised it, and I I left there in a very, very bad mood. And at the time,
Sad but inspired.
yeah, I guess so. Because at the time, I was also writing for a website called SOFREP, Special Operations Forces Report. But so I was doing writing for them, and normally just news analysis and yeah, big picture stuff, geopolitical stuff. And then I decided that I wanted to write about my experiences going through that counselor's office. It was one of the few times I had put in any sort of emotion into my writing. Normally it's just the analysis stuff, and I went and do a deep dive about how frustrating it was about going into this situation, and essentially all the experiences and all the time and tears and sweat you burnt through just to get to the other side and of the training, just so you can be on a team. And once you get on the team, you learn more than you learned in the course. All that meant essentially not a whole lot in terms of what the civilian world sees as valuable, or at least what the
Right. Yeah, what did we say earlier was like basically 10 years of your life, and they're saying, yeah, it's worth maybe a year's worth of credits
yeah
or
yeah
two.
yeah
Yeah.
and it was my the sense that I got, and what I wrote in the article, part of what I wrote was, this is the sort of stuff that contributes to the suicide rates, because it just there was no speaking of cultural communications, there was no communication between the military military world and the civilian world. And what happens is people get lost in the mix in between. So I wrote
Sure.
that article, and I think it was called I don't even remember what was it called. College After Special Operations, I think was the name of it. And you might have to just search for it,
Yeah.
because
I was gonna say maybe we can provide a link or a little
yeah,
something
we'll find a link.
somewhere.
But all my articles at SOFREP got memory hold. And I haven't figured out why. No one will answer me. But anyway,
Oh,
so
what does
yeah,
that mean?
memory hold.
Yeah.
You've read 1984, haven't you?
No.
Oh, you Canadians,
Oh no.
you
Yeah,
Canadian,
we're
you
Canadian.
Canadians, you got to read up on your dystopian fantasy novels.
Oh no.
Yeah, memory hold is just a term for one of the characters is in charge of going through old news articles and finding things that don't fit the current narrative. So he basically burns information and throws it down the memory hole, so it's
Oh.
never to be seen again. So you control the
Wow.
current narrative, therefore you control the past and you control the future. Yeah.
Crazy. Okay,
Oh,
I'll
you got to
have to
read
read that for
1984.
sure.
That'll be required reading for
Yeah.
you. But yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know where that went. All my articles are gone.
Went in the memory hole.
Yeah, it went memory hole.
Or hole.
It's demoralizing, but I think there was some mirror of the article somewhere that I found, so it's still out there in the wild. But it proof that it actually happened, because eventually I ended up getting invited to go to a TED Talks X. I always have to caveat it. I wasn't invited to a TED Talks. I was invited to one of the TEDx talks. It's like a.
I mean, it looks really legit on the YouTube. I watched the first half.
It's still, apparently it's got like 200,000 views or something like that. I don't. It was, every time I look at it, I still am shocked that there's that many people that have watched it. But
do you ever watch yourself and realize how well spoken you were on such a big stage? Because that's pretty frightening to, I think, most people, and you did it really well.
It was funny. It was a big stage, but it was a Friday night at a Penn State sister campus, and the Penn State team was playing at home the following morning. So basically, no one was there, but they recorded it at least.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. You did awesome.
Thank you.
So,
it went well.
Yeah. Had you been afraid of public speaking before, or was it just easy breezy?
It was my only fear, because at the time I was still working for the Green Beret Foundation, and it kind of morphed into me pitching the next ridgeline and what we were working on the next ridgeline, and so it was. It didn't. The only thing that worried me was not getting out what needed to get out, and not attracting the right attention to what the next ridgeline was, and what we hope to accomplish with it. But I wasn't too concerned with. I wasn't nervous in the traditional public speaking sense, just because I think going through the Q course, that's one thing you get broken of real quick is. Just you're expected to jump into whatever fray is put in front of you, and
right. Can you talk about that actually? Yeah. From a civilian perspective, like when you guys mention all these courses, I just sounds like the alphabet.
Sure,
like I don't know what they include. So what is the Q course, if you can, if you're allowed to describe it?
Yeah, then that's just something else that veterans have a problem with, is just diving into acronyms and
Yeah.
So
it's just like it's so automatic for you guys. You don't have to think about it.
So the Special Forces Qualification course is the required training pipeline for Army Special Forces or Green Berets. So for me, I enlisted as a Special Forces recruit, which meant that I went to infantry basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia. And as long as I graduated that, I could go to airborne school. And as long as I graduated that, I had a spot at a selection preparation course, which was in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And then as long as I made it through that and I didn't quit, I had a guaranteed spot to go to selection. And that was pretty much all the contract was as long as you make it through the initial hurdles, you can go to selection. And if you get selected, then it's on you. But if I didn't get selected,
how long is that process?
From basic training to my selection class, it was June 2002 till January of 2003 is when I started selection.
Okay.
So, infantry basic was challenging because it was, that was my first dive into the military. But airborne school was. We'll call it a joke. I don't really.
Okay.
It was just painful. Airborne school was painful because it's just. It's.
Are you more in a classroom setting?
No, it's an army. It's a standard army school, and I don't. It's just a.
Dumb it down for me. I
understand. It's just you go on a lot of very slow paced runs designed to make you bust your knees up, as far as I can tell. And then the only cool thing about airborne school is the 5 jumps you get at the end. So you go through 3 weeks of ground training and just drilling on how to properly fall on the ground with a parachute on, and then at the end of it, you get 5 jumps out of a bird, and that's then you're graduated. Nice. So I mean that was the cool part. Everything else is just like, oh, get me out of here. you have.
I guess especially because when you say infantry, that's like that's guns and stuff,
Yeah,
right?
infantry is that's the ground based combat element of modern armies.
So I assume for a bunch of men and women, that's pretty exciting. Generally, more high tempo stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's designed for it's the shoot, move, communicate is kind of the name of the game.
So it's gonna sound like I'm switching gears entirely, but I'm gonna come back around. So a few questions I have of you in the military overseas. You're in Iraq. What would a typical day in Iraq look like for you, if there even is a typical day?
So a typical day in Iraq it started off when I first went over there. I was the junior engineer on the team, so primarily it was handling our internal logistics and loadouts and our big containers and getting all of our equipment to where it needs to go, and just handling the logistics for our team was our priority on for the engineers on the team. And
Yep. And when you say our team, like how big is that?
so a special forces detachment ideally is 12 guys. And you've got
Wow.
two engineers, two weapons, two communications, two medics, and then the intelligence part. You got the intel sergeant, and then you got the warrant officer, and then the team sergeant, and then the team leader, the captain. And the warrant officer is kind of like they're like the utility player, I guess you could say. And so every piece of that, there's usually a senior and a junior, and you all have a different focus. And the idea of it is that you can split your team into two groups and be effective in different areas, but all of it has to do with by, with, and through concept of going over and either training a government to fight against an insurgency or building up an insurgency to fight against the government. That's kind of the
See, what I think is really crazy about the team is I was expecting you to say like, 50 or 100 or something, because in my head I'm imagining like a military base,
yeah.
but you guys aren't on a base. You guys are in Iraq, in a town. And when you say 12 people and then you divide it basically six and six sometimes, like you guys are really in the town. You're not, it's not like a known presence.
That
Is that
well,
true?
ideally, and it depends on the mission. In Iraq, it was a little bit different because it was more big army. It was more tied to
Yep.
we were under operational control of the 101st Airborne. We were in their
Right.
air ground space, and so
I get
and,
sorry, I guess what
yeah,
I'm thinking though is like if one person or two people on the team kind of, screw something up or forget something, it's a huge deal when your
yeah,
team is smaller like that. Like,
yeah, yeah.
it's high stakes for you to forget, imagine the weapons guy, or for you, the logistics of, whichever, like you can't screw up.
Yeah, yeah, that's part of the selection process. Is they're looking for people that not only are they have situational awareness to know what should be done and what shouldn't be done, but they're looking for integrity to do what you're supposed to be doing even when no one's watching, because eventually you're going to be thrown into a situation where that has to be done, otherwise bad things are going to happen.
And nobody's watching over you to help to make, if you miss something, nobody's going to notice it. It's all up to you.
Yeah, or if you do miss something, you might end up on CNN, or
Yeah.
something that you cause will end up on CNN. It's because you're a tactical or operational element, which is, so there's strategic level, there's operational level, and there's tactical level. And strategic is big picture global stuff. Operational is more
Mhm.
regional, and then tactical is on the ground with cities and towns. But you're a tactical element that has the potential to have strategic influence. It's kind of the way I
Right.
think about it.
Yeah.
And
All
we're
right.
and the
Go ahead.
teams are all based on OSS, or the Office of Strategic Services during World War II, and the SAS, British Special Air Service. Their model of their teams was kind of what structured how a special forces detachment was, developed and grown in the late 50s, early 60s.
Wow, that's very cool. Did you say British there for a second?
Yeah, the British Special Air Service
British
was
Special Air.
one of the forefathers, I guess you could say, of we got roots, and it's all of the clandestine services type stuff, because it's not well, originally, and this is kind of a conflict within the special forces community, I guess, is, are we door kickers, or are we insurgents and, unconventional warfare agents? And, my preference was always the unconventional warfare. That's kind of where I naturally gravitated towards, and when we were doing operations that felt like it was unconventional warfare, I felt a lot happier, I guess you could say.
So what would be? Can you actually dive into that a little bit? Because
Yeah.
civilian side.
I get my day. I forgot. I run down rabbit holes, so I'm glad you're here to reel me back
No,
in.
I love. I find this is really. I think a lot of people will find this so interesting and so much cool information.
So a day for me was when I was an engineer, when I was the acting engineer on the team. It was the day-to-day operations, the planning cycle of, all right, we got to go out and train our Iraqi troops, and whatever the skills are for the day, to work up towards operations and stuff like that. And then I don't know, after a few months on the ground, and that would just be like, wake up, go to sleep type deal, and we'd go out on operations as they would come in, and I'd be assigned, in a certain vehicle. I usually ended up being the front Humvee gunner, which was
Oh wow.
the first convoy I went on, I was the front vehicle. Or wait, no, I was a rear gunner on our convoy, and I just remember praying the entire time that it was dark out, so I didn't have to worry too much, because most vehicles are on a curfew. But I just remember praying, like, please don't anyone drive up. I don't want to shoot anybody on my first night over here.
Right.
But
That was your first night.
yeah, that was when
First night, first convoy. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's what you're expected. I mean, there's no like hiding. I mean,
No, you just go in and dive
well,
in.
and the thing is like, everyone's like, I remember going through the Q course. Everyone's like, get the green beret, get the tab, be the cool guy. But it takes a while before you start to realize that. And I guess they tell you this up front, but you don't listen if you just focus on getting the beret and getting the fancy the trinkets to prove that you're a cool guy. But there's a burden that comes with it. The burden is a lot heavier than the actual process of earning it.
Right. So you talking about, first night, first convoy going in, it like makes me nervous thinking about that.
Yeah,
So I can't even imagine. You must have been almost numb there, like.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I can remember a lot of that actual convoy, and a lot of just pulling out of the main gate onto the main road. And it was January, and I can remember a lot of that night just because it was a very momentous event. But
Right. Like no backing out. You're there.
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yep, you're in the game.
You can't hit pause. You
No.
can't end the game.
Nope. Nope.
You're just there. All right. So back to typical day, first convoy. Go on.
So we'd go on convoys, and you're assigned to a specific spot in the operation, and you help out with the planning and the operational, all the components that go into planning an operation and coordinating with the Iraqis. So it's a lot of interacting with other people to plan towards accomplishing whatever goal you end up going on. And there's not much of a staff to speak of, because you're the staff, and you're the operator.
Right.
So figure it out and do it, and work with your team to make things happen. So we go out, we get intel on different personnel in the area, and we'd put together a packet and go with our Iraqis, and we'd go arrest them. Or that was the plan. Either arrest them,
Wow.
or if they wanted to fight, then you'd fight. But
So when you're dealing with the Iraqi people, is that relationships you had to form yourself, or some already formed based on people who were there? Before you?
The previous team, so we were in Samarra, Iraq, and there was a small outpost in the northwest corner of the city that used to be like a hotel casino that I guess Saddam used to go to a lot, but it was
Yeah.
just like a small 3-story building. I mean, it probably would have been really nice at some time, but it had a bunch of bullet holes in it because ended up being a main base for the whatever military forces were there. So we were co-located with the 101st Airborne, and we had an element of Iraqi scouts, which would be like their equivalent of Rangers over there, that were located with us, and they would work with the special forces detachments that were assigned at that location. So the team that was there before us, they had a working relationship with the Iraqis, and that's the Iraqis' home, so they rotate in and out of their homes back into their bases wherever they'd work out of. So we had a good working relationship that we flowed into, and
So then
yeah.
in your interactions, would you say then generally they're pretty positive with the Iraqis you were working with because they're trying to protect their home and you're just
Yeah.
trying to help them do that?
Yep. Yep. And it's the initial the initial like first meet, you getting used to each other and understanding who each other is, and
Communication styles and the
yeah,
different
yeah.
nuances.
International communications came into play pretty
Yeah.
regularly, and just figuring out like how they tick and how we tick, and you start off, you do it's called left seat right seat ride, where basically you go with the previous team and they take you on just a confidence building operation with your Iraqi scouts, and so that gets your feet wet, and then you start developing more. The other team leaves and you stay behind and you start working closer with the Iraqis and build up an operational tempo with their leadership. So it's think of it like two counterparts. Like we have our side of the house and they have their side of the house, and they're supposed to sort of mirror each other.
Yeah,
We're supposed to train them and go out and work together.
right. And then I'm thinking when you're first meeting, and then really every time you're meeting with the Iraqis, they're even down to not only the words you use or the words you give to your interpreter if you're using one, even your physical stance and like where you stand is probably or sit
Everything.
or everything is probably really important.
And it helps because in the Q course, the thing that they repeat to you from day one of selection is you are always being assessed. So,
Yes.
and that even it's, they're telling you that as instructors. So, you're thinking, oh, okay, the instructors are always watching us, but what they really mean is everywhere you go, because you have, the fancy hat, the fancy tab on your shoulder that says your special forces, you're being watched more closely than anyone else. So you're always being assessed with how you behave. So if once you graduate and you get the fancy green hat and the fancy tab on your shoulder that says your special forces, is everyone is watching you closely because you're expected to uphold a very high standard, and people will be watching to see if you hold that standard or not. And that goes doubly so when you're working with foreign troops, because you're expected to be the subject matter expert, and if you're not, then they're going to know it instinctively. They're going to be able to sense. It's like
Yeah.
they can you can smell weakness, you can smell fear,
Yep.
and if you display any of that, it can end up bad.
So then my next thought was, in your first few meetings and really any interactions you had when you're overseas, was there anything, did anything ever happen where you suddenly felt really uncomfortable because of their communication style? Maybe nothing was wrong, but, they didn't have the training needed. So you're very mindful of like not to, make things uncomfortable when they shouldn't be. But on the reverse end, were there some kind of things that happened that you just kind of had to live through, and like maybe it was a miscommunication, but like you were suddenly, did they, I'm
Uh,
picturing like narcos scenes,
oh yeah.
where
Well,
they accidentally pull up a gun and they didn't mean to, or they didn't think about it, or.
there were a couple instances. We had one guy that was acting. Basically, he was saying things that threw red flags up as far as whether or not he was loyal to the mission or if he had other third party loyalties, and that's something you always got
Right,
to watch out for, just because there's a lot of blue on green type attacks.
for sure.
Um, but
So when something like that happens and they say something, would you like look around to your other team members like right away? You know, like was it a red flag immediately to everyone?
I think in this situation, I was kind of the one. I was the one that heard about it first because the Iraqi teammates were telling me about it, and
Interesting.
so that in that situation, I brought it up to my leadership, and I think I had a good relationship with the individual in question, so I talked to him about it first with our interpreter. And your interpreters are they're not just interpreters on a good team. If you're lucky and you have a good interpreter, they're more of an advisor as well. And they're not just an
Right.
input output device with legs. Or they're that you ask them for advice on what do you think he really means. So
Right.
and then I think our leadership and their leadership had a sit down conversation with him and straightened it all out and got a good sense. It was probably partly a misunderstanding, but in hindsight, I think there's a lot of gray area, especially if you're
Well, and better to check it out than
yeah.
to,
Well, and
ignore the red
well,
flag.
and they're also they're in their homeland with foreign armies marching around on a regular basis. So in hindsight, I could only imagine that the type of
How that feels.
yeah. There's going to be a lot of gray area, a lot of gray area. That's
Right. I like what you said about the interpreter too, because if it was just interpreting the words, translating them, we have apps for that are pretty accurate
yeah.
nowadays, but it's more than that. It's like you said, interpreting the meaning and what do you really think. So they're a huge
Yeah,
advocate.
our
So
interpreter was awesome. He had been working with special forces teams for years, so he was extremely well trained, and not just language interpreter stuff, but just military stuff in general. He was
and would he have been an Iraqi
yeah he
person?
was yeah.
Yeah. Wow. All right. And then, so you're in Iraq, you're doing all that stuff. You're right in the cities, amongst all like the destruction and everything. Like you said, that casino that was probably really nice didn't look the same anymore. Were you able to see a lot of good, or positive things, or was it all kind of, as us civilians tend to picture, as like gray and missing buildings and just pure destruction? Like, was
No,
there
it was
anything in the
I
community
oh
that was
it
positive?
was Iraq was the sense that I got, it was much more calm than I expected. Um, there was it was a lot of police action. Like if you it felt hold on, I'm trying to think of how to best describe it. It felt like more it was police action type stuff with the potential to escalate into heavy shootouts, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like you,
So kind of always on the tipping
yeah,
point, pretty
yeah,
tense.
yeah. That's a good way to put it. And so, like, we were there in 2006 when the Golden Mosque. You can look it up. The Al-Asqari Mosque, the Golden Mosque, got blown up. It basically someone took an entire night and rigged the entire building with demolitions and then detonated it at like 7 in the morning or something like that. And
Wow.
so I was doing late shift at this point. I was doing intel work at night and then sleeping during the day, and running operations whenever we had them. But my schedule was up at night, sleeping during the day. So I had just laid down at this point, and then I hear this huge explosion that I could feel it shaking the foundation of the building. And then
Wow.
I poked my head up in my bunk. I kind of looked around. I didn't hear any running out in the hall, but then I start hearing like chunk, 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 and my initial
Oh
my
no.
initial thought was like, is that anti? It sounds like anti-aircraft guns going off. But it turned out that it was the golden plates on the roof of the mosque getting thrown up into the sky and falling back down to the ground.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so I didn't hear any running around. I didn't hear any chaos, and I was already wiped out at this point. And so I just went back to bed, and no
That's
one was
hilarious.
calling for me.
I was
So
thinking, I was thinking you were gonna say, so I was up for, 24
uh,
hours that
I,
day.
I
But
well I got up about probably an hour and a half, 2 hours later, I think, and I had no idea what was going on. And I went upstairs and they're like, yeah, go take a look at the skyline. Then I go out and,
Jeez.
there's the Golden Moss is probably like about a kilometer away from our team house, and it's just what used to be a beautiful golden dome was now just a twisted chunk of concrete and rebarb. So
All right, I'm gonna need to point out something very important that you just said. As a Canadian, I just heard you say kilometer. Is that normal
well,
over
it's
there?
normal in the military, yeah. The
Oh, I
yeah,
love
because
it.
all of our maps run off kilometer
Perfect.
blocks. So
That makes it
oh,
much easier for me to
I
understand.
understand it. I think the metric system makes a lot more sense. I don't.
Yeah,
There's some weird wizardry in the imperial system, and it's all yeah
definitely.
number wizardry. But yeah, that's an entirely different rabbit hole.
Right. All right. So all that's going on, you're over there, you have some good interaction, especially with the Iraqis. Life is pretty interesting. Day to day is kind of, relatively, you don't really have a structure. You have a structure, but more or less you
It's
don't because
it's
anything
a
could
it's a
happen.
structure that is sitting on top of like a river. Like it can get
Right.
chaotic at
Yeah.
any moment. You just gotta flow with it.
So then were you you must have been pretty close to your team. Did you notice how long were you guys over
We
there
were there
actually?
for 8.5, 9 months. It wasn't a
All in the
full.
same place?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we
Oh
went
wow.
on convoys back to get supplies at Anaconda and Balad. Those are the two bases we were near, and I hated going to the bases. I despised it
Why is that?
because it was you had to play the army game, and
Right.
at this point, at some point, I was an engineer at first, and at some point, our team sergeant got into a fight with our intel sergeant, and our intel sergeant got fired. And then they're like, "Hey, Blake, you're kind of
Wow.
smart and you're good with computers, so you're going to be the new intel guy." And
Oh
normally the
man.
intel job requires it's called the 18 Fox course, which is the course where you learn the intelligence structures and the procedures and all the techniques that you got to do when you're overseas. And so I basically what I started doing is I started going out on meets with our warrant officer, and we'd meet with Iraqis and informants and um our our source
Which
network.
is, and that's crazy because we haven't said it yet, and I know Dan loves to say it, the CEO of the Catalyst, and I love to say it. You were one of the youngest Special Forces members since the Vietnam War, and I know it's because of a change in the rules, but it's still a big deal. So you're taking on a pretty big job with not as much training as they typically have, and you're on top of that, you're young.
Yeah, I was at the time I was 22. So yeah,
Wow.
2006. Yeah, Actually, I was 21. I hadn't turned 22 yet.
So your average 21-year-old in back in the United States is out drinking and probably going to Florida for spring break, and you're over
Yeah.
there doing intel in Iraq, which is pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
and that honestly, once I started doing the intel job, I blossomed into that because I was not a good engineer. I got into I chose the engineer path because I thought it was going to be mostly demolitions, but then the surprise, you're going to be logistics now, and I lose things all the time. So that ended up being a terrible spot for me. But yeah, once doing the intel stuff, it I enjoyed it a lot because I like I said I look for patterns and anomalies, so I would stay up all night just reading over intel reports from our area or from our region that would come in over the over the our secured networks. And so in doing that, I'd put together the big spider web of on the computer. This is like pre-Palantir. I think they just started using Palantir at this point, but you'd put
Is
yeah,
that a program that maps
it's
things
an
out for you?
intelligence analyst toolkit. Basically, you create a spider web of who's financing arms and who's doing like significant events, significant people, and significant
Yep.
organizations, and how they interplay, and how what the big board looks like, I guess. So
Yep.
once I started doing that, then I really started enjoying or feeling like I was contributing something valuable to the team because otherwise I
Yep.
was just losing keys and stuff.
So then, if you're, I assume you're just with those 12 guys pretty much all the time. You guys aren't really in much communication or direct, like you're not staying with other teams of, like other special forces teams, are you?
No, our sister team was located in Crete, which is probably about 20 kilometers away. Um,
Yeah. So did you notice in the 9 months that you're there, you're obviously like pretty friendly with the guys you're with, your team, so you're always working together, you're living, breathing, sleeping together, not wait, living, breathing, eating together.
so you sleep together
Take a
sometimes.
seat.
Hey, you do what you got to
Yeah.
do because it's
Okay.
cold.
Um, so did you notice as the months went on, I'm sure like mentally it was pretty draining on everybody all the time. I mean, a high stress environment. Did you notice throughout your time there any of your team members being affected mentally?
Yeah, there was. I
I,
mean,
I,
myself. I had some. I'm trying to think. You know, well, the best example I have is our medic. One of our medics, our senior medic. He really good dude, brilliant, hilarious, fun to be around. But he liked his alone time, and he had his personality type and our team sergeant's personality type did not mesh at all. And they were button heads even before we left. And yeah,
oh,
and like halfway
wow.
through the trip, Chris ended up commandeering a room by himself down the hall. He just kind of, yeah,
That's the
yeah,
medic?
yeah. Sorry, yeah, it's Chris. Sorry, I called him our medic. Yeah, Chris took this room down the hall, and I just remember one night our team sergeant going down the hall like, "Where's Chris? I gotta talk to him." And this was like Chris is like, "I got my alone time, past 8 o'clock or whatever, so just leave me alone." So we all knew to just leave him alone, and but the team sergeant had something that he had to talk to him about, and I remember watching this play out. Like the team sergeant goes banging on his door, and Chris takes this little scrap of paper that he used to plug the door handle hole. That was like it was it was a makeshift door cover, right? Yeah, and it
Lock.
becomes a peephole. So
Yeah.
he rips this out and he pokes his eye through, and he's like, "Yeah, what do you want?" And it was Chris's way of saying, leave me alone. I don't want to deal with you right now. Just go away.
Yeah.
And it was there was instances like that would flare up every once in a while, and we actually had a it was kind of close to a mutiny on our team because we our team sergeant and the team it was just it was a weird mix, and our teams and our
Difficult.
team sergeant just didn't get along well with most of the team. His personality type was more it was more
Oh, wow.
he had come from the Marine Corps, so it was more uh, yeah, he was just
Different.
more direct, and like he was more blunt,
Uh,
and part of the we kind of were like we didn't understand how he made it through the Q course because his personality type was so abrasive that it just it like if he goes out and works with foreign troops, it could cause problems, and and it
yeah.
just rubbed us the wrong way, and we started it was kind of an ugly situation, but it eventually cooled down, and we just kept plodding along. But
Yeah, what you talked about a second ago about Chris, your medic, and needing that alone time. I think I'm always thinking about like the similarities between, civilian and military life, but how different they play out and feel in the world. So he needed some alone time, but he's in Iraq and it's not a 9 to 5,
mhm.
it's a 24/7. If we need you, that's it. But I think for any civilian listening, it's like we all want to get home, get off of, go home from our office from 9 to 5, lay on the couch, watch TV, eat some snacks, and we get that most days, whereas poor Chris needing that alone time, it's just like, it's difficult to
Yeah,
really allow that or,
yeah,
have that time. You don't have that
yeah,
opportunity
and
more or less. And for 9 months straight, it's not just the 5 day week. It's
yeah,
until
and
you leave.
it was. I think the one big difference is that acceptance of that reality going into it. Is you know that
For
you're on the
sure.
24/7 clock, and complaining about it is not going to do you any good. And if you complain too hard, then you might end up in a, you know, might end up in handcuffs, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I guess it's really important before you guys head over to manage your expectations of what you feel like you want or need and what's
Yeah,
realistic
and
once you're
a
over
big
there.
part of special forces training is weeding out anyone who might end up having problems in those sort of unstable situations. Like it's you're supposed to be able to
Yeah.
flow in the chaos, become an agent of chaos.
Yeah, for sure. So then aside from, the medic kind of isolating himself a little bit, giving himself those few hours, and you guys were probably helpful as much as you could in that, I'm guessing, at least. I imagine you were pretty helpful when he said, I need my
Well,
alone time. I
actually,
can't see you
he
bothering him too
bothered me
much.
a lot because I ended up being like the we had a satellite hookup with internet, so it was a satellite internet hookup, HughesNet. I think they're still around. Um, so like for whatever reason, I had a lot of experience in computers and a little bit of experience in networks and getting group LAN networks together. So I ended up kind of being the de facto network engineer for our internet. So Chris was always talking to his wife, over ICQ and instant messenger and stuff. And so he'd be like, "Hey, the internet's out at 3 in the morning," and I'm like, "You got to go fix it." I'm like, "Fuck, okay, oops, sorry." Um, so there was Chris was coming to me a lot to get the internet fixed, and but it was part of the team morale thing is having communications back home was a big an important thing for everybody because I think the entire team had family. So
Yeah.
um,
Oh yeah, I remember being on the
mm,
other end of that, being the kid in high school and not having my parents around for a long time and getting to spare a little email once every now and then, but it was few and far between. And then if you did get to talk somehow on the phone, which I don't even know how we did that, the delay was like 5 to 7 seconds. So, somebody would say a word and then literally like 5 full seconds, which is a
oh yeah,
long time if you
oh
stop
yeah.
are silent for that. And then if you both speak at the same time, you got 30 seconds trying to figure out
Yeah,
who can talk first.
we had
So,
the Iridium sat phones. We had a couple of those on our team, and every once in a while we got to call back home with those. So
yeah. All right. So then that was, so do you talk to anybody who's on your team over there, or did you guys kind of go your separate ways? And
yeah, I kind of once I kind of separated. There's a couple of guys I've talked to a few times, but I haven't stayed in contact with uh, not anyone, no one like regularly.
or even somebody from the Special Forces
Yeah,
training that
yeah,
you were in,
I
did
got
you
a
keep in
couple
touch
of
with any of those guys? Yeah.
the guy I mentioned, Aaron Anderson, that started the Green Beret Foundation, and another buddy
Right.
that we were going through the basic training together in the Q course.
Do you know if they're all still, well, aside from the Green Beret, he's
Yeah,
out of the
yeah.
military, I'm assuming. Yeah. Are most of them out or any of them out or?
Other one stayed in that I mentioned. He's still in, and I
Yep.
think he just got back from Afghanistan not too long ago. His younger brother actually went through the Q course too and made it through, so he's got yeah good genes in that
Wow.
family.
I was going to ask about them, anyone you knew from the special forces that you worked with or went to basic with, if they transitioned out, do you know
Well,
much
the
about it?
Aaron Anderson, the one that created the Green Beret Foundation, he's been successful in number of areas, but I haven't talked closely enough to him to kind of get an understanding of where he's at right now. But I know he was doing some interesting stuff in finance out in the West Coast, and he's got a good career built up for himself. So
Right. And then, which finally leads me back to a question is during your transition, I know we talked about it earlier, it was kind of difficult getting those college credits. That was really hard to translate your past experience onto, with the university because they that translation of your experience just didn't really exist in a way that they could
Hmm.
give you course credit for. So when you were transitioning out, it was kind of you were on your own. It was a little bit difficult. You ran through your GI Bill
Hmm.
money, which is tuition money. Could you
Sure.
actually talk about the GI Bill just
Yeah,
for a
so
second, like what
GI
it
Bill
is?
is when you enlist in the military, or I guess if you're an officer. Well, I don't know much about the officer, so I don't talk about that. But when you enlist, it's you
Mhm.
have access to funds that pay for tuition and books and fees for accredited
Right,
schools. And
right. And so you burnt through that money. I mean, it was a great benefit, but you were kind of burnt through it and then unsure, although you had your career lined up with your friend who started the Green Beret Foundation. Um, However, you didn't finish that.
yeah,
You didn't
I
finish your
finished
bachelor's,
my
did you?
bachelor's. Yeah, I got my general studies
Oh, you did.
degree,
Yeah,
and it was I think I
that's
went
right.
over by like 1.5 semesters, so I had to pay out of pocket for that. But I don't even know if I don't even
Right.
know if
And so,
I think it's changed since I went through and used that money, but I think it's atypical that you aren't able to finish a degree in that amount of time.
right. Cool. Yeah, just looking for the general info,
Sure,
um,
sure.
just for the people listening. So then you well, actually, when you were going through it, I'm not sure the Catalyst was where it is today. I would say the Catalyst program wasn't where it was today. You weren't aware of the Catalyst program. Looking back, could you speak to how the Catalyst fills that void of how they could
Yeah,
have helped you
absolutely.
in that time?
And it kind of ties in with what my thinking was with the next Ridgeline program at the Green Beret Foundation was spent a lot of time working closely with another former Special Forces guy that had a lot of experience in the private sector and high level finance before he went into Special Forces. So he was kind of he was mentoring me basically and helping me think through some of the problem sets that transition presents, and kind of what the thesis we came to is that networking was one of the biggest problems, or the biggest lack, or the biggest gaps that special forces guys face when they get out. And it's weird because we're supposed to be natural networkers. That's what we do on the ground when we go overseas, is we build networks. But once we get out of the military, at least for me, and a lot of the guys that I talked to, that network just wasn't something that we either thought about or worked on or whatever. So the thinking was is we need to have a way that someone can, when they're getting out, they say, "What do you want to do?" Figure out what they're wanting to do, figure out who we have in our network, then that can facilitate that desire to happen. And if we can build that network,
Hmm.
then we can make it like a self-perpetuating system where one person comes in and they get connected with the right people and they get opportunities and they develop a career, and that just becomes a new node that you can reach out to for the next person that comes in.
It's like that program you were describing when you're
Yep,
overseas
yep,
that
precisely,
creates that spider web for you, you know. That's basically what you
precisely.
wanted, but for the civilian world, for you guys,
Yep,
yeah,
and
making connections.
and
That's pretty cool.
so the problem lies in they're getting the resources for it and making it work, and busting through whatever red tape, and just making things work. So the good thing was is that, so back up and answer your question that you actually asked. So
Yeah, you're
the
good.
Catalyst program, it takes that sort of concept of developing out a network and focuses on the education component of it through building these relationships with schools and different organizations that can create those sort of opportunities or put you in front of the right people at the right time. So, um, you know,
Hmm.
my whole thinking was I wanted to build things that I wish I had access to when I got out, because it's just it's just how I think, I guess, and it's what I thought would have been the best fit for me. And Dan got a hold of me, uh, it, what he was building with the Catalyst program was so what happened was I had got information about the Catalyst program through Jeremy Miller, the Special Forces Association chapter president here in Indiana,
Oops.
and I jumped on the website and read
Hmm.
what the Catalyst program was, and I'm thinking, my God, this is exactly what I wanted to build with the next Ridgeline. So, I put in an application, and, within a few minutes, I think probably less than an hour, I got a call from Dan telling me that he's been trying to connect with me for a long time, and, he wants to meet up. So I'm like, yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And, here I am now.
That's awesome. So what you were looking for, which the Catalyst kind of helps with, is developing a network. Everyone taking the Catalyst program is related to the military in some way. So either a veteran themselves or their spouses, family members or spouses. And it really connects. It helps you with that one big thing that kind of started your journey once you transitioned out, is translating it helps translate that service,
Yeah.
your prior work experience into,
And not
education.
just the
And
translate word is some of the, I think, since I've been working with Dan and this program, is the translate word has been one of the most important concepts that's kind of crystallized in my mind, because the civilian world and the military world are two different cultures. We speak the same language most of the time, but it's completely different dialects, and there's a lot of overlap, but there's a lot of gaps. And
yeah,
yeah, yep,
they're
exactly.
similar, but
And
they're
it's
totally
like,
different.
so if that translation piece can be solidified and expanded on, so it bridges the gap in more areas and more consistently, then the veteran population will have an easier time of communicating what skills they bring to the table that provide value to the civilian world, and vice versa. So both sides are able to see the value proposition in the other culture, and it smooths out that initial uh, that initial painful transition period that I think every veteran has gone through, and not knowing exactly where they fit in and how they translate what what value they actually bring, and once they get out, because you go from some guys being just the high speed door kicker, flying around in helicopters and going on raids, to the civilian world where none of that really has a direct translatable value. But if if given
Right.
the proper mentorship and access to non-veterans that understand what that means and how that translates into something valuable for a private sector role.
And the value that the veterans can provide with that experience that hasn't been translated, that they're learning at the same time. And I think you came in and wanted to, build this network and got connected with Dan with the idea that you had experience that you knew was worth something, but you couldn't translate it. But I'm thinking there's the opposite. Opposite is probably true for veterans, where they might because the schools will tell them, hey, this is only worth so much. Even if you spent 10 years, we'll give you like a year off your bachelor, whatever else. They might not think that their experience is worth something, and they might not be aware. And then they go through years of schooling, when had they been a little, had somebody helped them with that translation of, you're worth a lot. Your experience is worth a lot. You are very knowledgeable. It's just the civilian world doesn't recognize it yet, but let's figure it out to show you your value in the world. And it can be, I'm thinking, a lot more than some veterans.
Yeah, that translation piece is just huge, and it goes both directions. It's like the analogy of someone coming for a doctor coming from a foreign country that gets here, and they can only find a job as a janitor because they don't have the required
Right.
paperwork. Or and I don't even know that happens for real, but I suppose it probably does. Yeah, and I like to slay red tape dragons. That's what I enjoy doing.
Yeah, that's great. And then yeah, so all those barriers to transition is, translating your experience, developing that network, and also figuring out what you want to do. I think a lot of time can be spent figuring out, like you started with your accounting
Hmm.
and marketing degree. And how long did it take, a semester or two for you to realize,
I think it
accounting
was
maybe isn't for you?
two, and then the third semester. It was once accounting level two is what got me, and not getting through the formulas on that, and realizing that yeah, all right, I'll stick with
Yep.
marketing, and then it went to accounting, and then marketing, and then just general studies because I had the career lined up, or so I thought.
Yep. So then when I'm thinking semester,
Mm,
is that 8 months time that
I
you
think
spent taking account,
yeah,
or is it
it's a
like
half. Well,
12?
it's
Yeah,
broken
not
up into three semesters. I think you got the spring, the fall, and the summer semester. So
so a year.
yeah,
So another thing that, the Catalyst helps is not only developing your network, helping translate your experience, but also they help you understand different areas of, different careers and what it really looks like because you're stepping foot in the office of different employment partners. So had you been able to go through the Catalyst program, maybe you wouldn't have spent a year in accounting because you would have spent a few days possibly with an accounting firm and went, oh yeah,
yeah.
this is not exactly what I
Or
thought
I
it
mean,
was.
it was always if I could just get in front of the right decision makers, I, pitching them on what my skill sets are shouldn't be too challenging. But it was always a matter of
Right.
there's no outlet for that sort of a thing that I was aware of at the time, and I didn't have enough of a professional network to begin with. So it was building everything from scratch that I've kind of
Yeah.
developed out over the years that seems to resonate really well with people is when you're in the military, you spend all this time, and it's like being in a space station. You know everything, you know everyone, you're used to the environment, you're used to the people, you're used to the patterns and the rhythms of the day. And then one day they're like, "Hey, you got to go." And there's the airlock. So see ya. And then you just poof, you're off, drifting into the
Right.
yeah, or if not to Earth,
Back to earth.
hopefully just not you're not burning in on some
Just
rock
the
somewhere.
right. Right. Wow. That's a great analogy. Okay, so from all those that deep dive into your a little your career and education and how the catalyst got you to where you are, what do you think we have on the docket list?
I'm starting today actually on the Indiana Wesleyan University cohort, our first cohort with the our partnership with them, and so I'll be starting that, and that'll be good for me to get a firsthand experience of what all of our future candidates are going to be going through. And my role as the director of education is to build out those partnerships with other educational organizations and find educational opportunities that we can make available to veterans and their spouses, and just see what doors we can get open. Yep. Expand the spider web, and so for the podcast,
Yeah,
I think a
yeah,
big part
that's
of it
awesome.
is it's this translation piece, like what we're doing right now, is translating, for the audience what my backgrounds and my experiences and training that I've went through, that means from my perspective, and how I've been able to translate that into something valuable for the civilian world. So it helping that translation piece with every conversation that we have, bringing on veterans that have been through the Catalyst program already, and getting their experiences of before Catalyst and after Catalyst, and then also bringing on veterans that have had successful transition stories, and getting their experiences and asking them what it took to get to where they are. Because if they've been successful in whatever venture they've been on, then they've got a story to tell, and that story is probably going to help out more people.
And one of our favorite things is just sitting around and hearing the military chat. Even me as the military kind of brat growing up, I did work for the military, not in the military, but for the military. But when I moved to the United States, I was totally separated from, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know anyone who lives or is in the military personally right now where I live. So it always feels good to just talk to people
For
who have
sure.
been through similar things or have the similar lives that you had and moving around. Like it's that kind of campfire.
If
That would be awesome. All right. I think that about wraps us up here on the Boots to Boardroom podcast for today. All right. See you guys next time. Thank you.
If you'd like to learn more about the Catalyst program and possibly attend one of our classes, please visit us at thecatalystprogram.org. Or if you'd like to find out more about possibly being a guest on our show, you can email me at blake.miles@thecatalystprogram.org. Just let me know what you're all about, and we'll see what we can do.